The smoke alarm blared as Sarah watched in horror. Her precious parking permit was engulfed in flames. But this was no accident. The HOA president stood smugly beside the smoldering remains, a twisted smile on her face. "You'll learn to play by our rules," she sneered. Little did she know, the police were already on their way, ready to uncover the shocking truth behind the HOA's vendetta. Sarah collapsed onto the curb, her hands trembling as she stared at the charred plastic in disbelief. For years, she had navigated the strict regulations of her homeowners association, but this was a new low, even for them. It had started innocently enough. She'd forgotten to display her parking permit one day, and the HOA pounced, issuing a hefty fine. When she tried to explain the oversight, the president, Ms. Blackwood, brushed her off. "Rules are rules, Sarah. You know the consequences." Incensed, Sarah had filed a formal complaint, hoping to resolve the issue amicably. But Ms. Blackwood was unyielding, determined to make an example of her. "You think you can just waltz in here and expect special treatment? This community has standards to uphold." The back and forth escalated, with Sarah pleading her case and Ms. Blackwood stubbornly refusing to budge. Tensions reached a boiling point, and Sarah, in a moment of desperation, resorted to an act of defiance. She removed her permit and hid it, hoping to avoid further fines. Little did she know, the HOA president had been watching her every move, her beady eyes narrowed with suspicion. And now, as Sarah stared at the charred remains of her permit, she realized the horrifying truth. Ms. Blackwood had deliberately destroyed it, sending a clear message that there would be no mercy for those who dared to defy the HOA's iron grip. Anger and disbelief coursed through Sarah's veins. This was not just a petty dispute over a parking permit. It was a blatant abuse of power, a violation of her rights as a homeowner. She knew she had to fight back, but the odds seemed stacked against her. As she contemplated her next move, a sudden realization dawned on her. The smoke alarm had been triggered, which meant the authorities had been alerted. Perhaps this could be her chance to expose the HOA's wrongdoing and seek justice. With a newfound sense of determination, Sarah pulled out her phone and dialed 911, her voice trembling as she recounted the shocking events that had just unfolded. "Please, you have to help me," she pleaded. "The HOA president just burned my parking permit, and I think she's been targeting me for months. I need the police to investigate this immediately." The dispatcher on the other end assured her that help was on the way, and Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could finally put an end to the HOA's reign of terror and restore some semblance of normalcy to her life. As the sirens wailed in the distance, Sarah steeled herself for the confrontation to come, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and resolve. The battle lines had been drawn, and she was ready to fight for her rights, no matter the cost. The police arrived within minutes, their flashing lights cutting through the evening shadows. Sarah rushed to meet them, her voice trembling as she recounted the shocking events that had just unfolded. The HOA president, Ms. Blackwood, she deliberately destroyed my parking permit. I saw her do it with my own eyes. The officers listened intently, their expressions grave. They understood the gravity of the situation. A homeowners association overstepping its bounds and engaging in outright vandalism was a serious offense. "We'll need to investigate this thoroughly," the lead officer, Detective Parker, assured Sarah. "Can you take us to the scene and show us exactly what happened?" Sarah nodded, her heart pounding with a mixture of relief and apprehension. Finally, someone was willing to listen and take action against the HOA's blatant abuse of power. As they approached the charred remains of the permit, Sarah pointed to the smoldering ashes. "Right there, officer." Ms. Blackwood was standing right next to it, gloating about how I would learn to play by their rules. Detective Parker examined the evidence, his brow furrowed in concentration. "This looks like arson, plain and simple. We'll need to secure the scene and interview the HOA president." The other officers quickly got to work, cordoning off the area and calling for backup. Sarah watched, a glimmer of hope slowly blossoming within her. Maybe, just maybe, justice would finally be served. As the detective approached Ms. Blackwood's imposing office, the woman emerged, a smug expression plastered across her face. "What seems to be the problem, officers?" Detective Parker leveled his gaze at her, his voice unwavering. "Ma'am, we have reason to believe you deliberately destroyed a resident's property. That's a serious offense, and we'll need you to come with us for questioning." Ms. Blackwood's eyes widened momentarily, but she quickly regained her composure. "I have no idea what you're talking about. This is an outrageous accusation. I demand to see a warrant." The detective's jaw tightened. "We'll be happy to get one, ma'am. In the meantime, you're coming with us." As the officers placed Ms. Blackwood in handcuffs and escorted her to the waiting squad car, Sarah felt a surge of both relief and trepidation. Finally, the HOA's reign of terror was being challenged, but she knew the battle was far from over. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but she was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. As the sirens faded into the distance, Sarah steeled herself for the long fight that lay ahead. The HOA had met its match, and she was ready to take them on, one battle at a time. The interrogation room felt suffocating as Ms. Blackwood sat across from Detective Parker, her manicured nails tapping impatiently on the metal table. Sarah watched from the observation room, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. "Let me get this straight, Ms. Blackwood," the detective began, his voice calm and measured. "You're telling me that you had no involvement in the destruction of Sarah's parking permit, even though eyewitnesses placed you at the scene?" The HOA president's lips curled into a sneer. "That's correct, officer. I have no idea what happened to her permit, and I certainly didn't destroy it. This is all a misunderstanding." Detective Parker leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "We have evidence that suggests otherwise. The smoke alarm was triggered, and the permit was found in ashes. Now, unless you have a reasonable explanation for that, I'm afraid you're going to have a hard time convincing me of your innocence." Ms. Blackwood's composure wavered for a moment, but she quickly regained her footing. "I'm telling you, I had nothing to do with this. Why would I jeopardize my position in the community by engaging in such petty vandalism?" "That's what I intend to find out," the detective replied, his voice hardening. "You see, Ms. Blackwood, the evidence we've gathered so far paints a very different picture. It suggests a pattern of harassment and abuse of power within the HOA, and you seem to be at the center of it all." Sarah watched with bated breath as the interrogation unfolded, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. Could the police finally bring down the HOA's reign of terror? Or would Ms. Blackwood's cunning and influence prove too powerful to overcome? As the detective continued to press the HOA president, Sarah couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this time, the scales of justice would tip in her favor. But she knew all too well that the battle was far from over. Suddenly, the door to the interrogation room burst open, and a team of uniformed officers rushed in, their faces grave. Detective Parker's expression darkened as he listened to their hushed reports. "What is it?" Ms. Blackwood demanded, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. The detective turned to her, his jaw set. "It seemed your office wasn't the only one we needed to investigate, Ms. Blackwood. We've just discovered evidence of financial impropriety and misuse of HOA funds, implicating several members of the board." Sarah's heart leaped with a mixture of shock and vindication. The HOA's web of corruption was finally starting to unravel, and she couldn't help but feel a surge of hope that justice might prevail. As the officers escorted Ms. Blackwood out of the interrogation room, the HOA president's once stoic demeanor crumbled, her eyes wide with panic. Sarah watched, a grim satisfaction settling in her chest. This was only the beginning of the end for the HOA's reign of terror. The news of the HOA's financial impropriety and corruption spread like wildfire through the community, sending shockwaves of disbelief and outrage. As Ms. Blackwood and several other board members were led away in handcuffs. Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. However, the victory was bittersweet. The damage inflicted by the HOA's abuses had been far-reaching, and Sarah knew that the road to healing and restoring normalcy would be long and arduous. In the days that followed, the police conducted a thorough investigation, uncovering a web of financial fraud, embezzlement, and abuse of power within the HOA. Residents who had been unfairly targeted and victimized by the organization's heavy-handed tactics came forward, sharing their harrowing stories. Sarah found herself at the center of the growing movement, her voice amplified by the outrage and support of her fellow homeowners. Together, they demanded accountability, transparency, and sweeping reforms to the HOA's governing structure. "We trusted these people to uphold the values of our community," Sarah said in a press conference, her eyes shining with determination. Instead, they betrayed that trust, using their positions of power to line their own pockets and terrorize innocent residents. "This has to stop, and we won't rest until justice is served." The media coverage was relentless, shining a spotlight on the HOA's misdeeds and fueling a public outcry for change. Suddenly, Sarah found herself thrust into the role of reluctant hero, her story resonating with homeowners across the country who had faced similar challenges. As the investigation progressed, the evidence against the HOA board members mounted. Financial records revealed a staggering pattern of embezzlement, with funds being siphoned off for personal use and lavish perks. The abuse of power, including the targeting of Sarah and other residents, was also meticulously documented. The community rallied around Sarah, offering their support and resources to aid in the fight for justice. Crowdfunding campaigns were launched to help cover the legal expenses, and volunteers stepped forward to assist in the gathering of evidence and the preparation of the case. For Sarah, the outpouring of support was both heartening and overwhelming. She had never sought the spotlight, but now she found herself at the forefront of a movement that had the potential to bring about real, lasting change. As the trial date approached, the tension in the community palpable. The residents were determined to see their former HOA leaders held accountable, and they were willing to do whatever it took to ensure that justice was served. Sarah steeled herself for the challenges that lay ahead, knowing that the road to victory would be long and fraught with obstacles. But with the backing of her community and the weight of the evidence on her side, she was more determined than ever to see this through to the end. The trial of the former HOA board members was a media spectacle, with the courtroom packed to capacity and a legion of supporters rallying outside. Sarah sat in the front row, her eyes fixed on the defendants as the prosecution laid out its case. The evidence was damning, with financial records, eyewitness testimonies, and a trove of damning emails, all pointing to a pattern of corruption and abuse of power. Sarah listened intently as the details of the HOA's misdeeds were meticulously laid out, her heart swelling with a mixture of anger and vindication. As the trial progressed, the defense's attempts to downplay the severity of the charges and paint the defendants as mere scapegoats fell flat. The prosecution was relentless, methodically dismantling every argument and exposing the depth of the HOA's corruption. Sarah's own testimony was a pivotal moment as she recounted the harrowing experience of having her parking permit destroyed and the subsequent investigation that had uncovered the board's misdeeds. Her voice trembled with emotion, but her resolve never wavered. "These people betrayed the trust of our community," she declared, her eyes burning with intensity. "They used their positions of power to line their own pockets and terrorize innocent residents. They have to be held accountable for their actions." The jury was visibly moved by Sarah's testimony, and as the trial drew to a close, it was clear that the tide had turned in her favor. The former HOA board members, once untouchable, now faced the very real prospect of substantial jail time and hefty fines. As the verdict was read, the courtroom erupted in a thunderous roar of applause and cheers. Sarah, tears streaming down her face, was engulfed in a sea of embraces and congratulations from her fellow residents. The long-awaited victory had finally been achieved. But even as the sense of triumph washed over her, Sarah knew that the real work was only just beginning. The HOA needed to be rebuilt from the ground up, with new leadership and a renewed commitment to transparency and accountability. The healing process for the community would be a long and arduous one, but she was determined to see it through. As the defendants were led away in handcuffs, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of bittersweet satisfaction. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The road ahead would be challenging, but with the support of her community behind her, she was more than ready to take it on. In the aftermath of the trial, the community was left to pick up the pieces and rebuild the shattered trust in their homeowners association. Sarah found herself at the forefront of this monumental task, her role as the reluctant hero now solidified. As the former HOA board members were sentenced to lengthy prison terms and ordered to pay hefty fines, Sarah and her fellow residents turned their attention to the daunting challenge of restructuring the organization from the ground up. "We can't just sweep this under the rug and pretend it never happened," Sarah said during a community meeting, her voice filled with a mixture of determination and trepidation. "We need to completely overhaul the HOA, starting with new leadership and a complete overhaul of the governing policies." The residents echoed her sentiments, their once passive attitudes now replaced by a fierce resolve to ensure that such abuses of power would never happen again. Together, they formed a transitional committee to oversee the HOA's transformation, with Sarah serving as the chairperson. The task ahead was daunting. They had to sift through the rubble of the old HOA, identifying and rooting out any remnants of the corrupted system. This meant scrutinizing every financial record, policy, and decision-making process, leaving no stone unturned. "We need to rebuild this from the foundation up," Sarah told the committee. "That means creating a completely new set of bylaws, establishing strict financial controls, and putting in place a system of checks and balances to prevent this kind of abuse from happening again." The community rallied behind the effort, with residents volunteering their time, expertise, and resources to ensure the HOA's rebirth. Lawyers, accountants, and community organizers joined the cause, lending their skills to the monumental undertaking. As the weeks turned into months, the transitional committee made steady progress, drafting new policies and procedures that prioritized transparency, accountability, and the interests of the community as a whole. Gone were the days of the HOA's iron-fisted rule. In its place, a more inclusive and democratic system began to take shape. Sarah, once a reluctant participant in this fight, now found herself deeply invested in the outcome. She had seen firsthand the damage that an unchecked HOA could inflict, and she was determined to ensure that such abuses would never again occur under her watch. "This is about more than just my own personal experience," she told the committee. "It's about restoring the trust and faith of our entire community. We owe it to ourselves and to those who suffered to get this right." As the new HOA began to take shape, a sense of cautious optimism began to spread through the neighborhood. The residents, once cowed by the oppressive regime, now felt empowered to participate in the decision-making process, their voices finally being heard. For Sarah, the transformation was both exhilarating and daunting. She knew that the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but she was more determined than ever to ensure that the HOA would never again be a source of fear and oppression for the community she loved. As the months passed, the newly reformed HOA began to take shape, with Sarah at the helm of the transitional committee. The work was arduous, with countless hours spent poring over legal documents, financial records, and community feedback. The community had rallied around the cause, with residents volunteering their time and expertise to help build the new organization from the ground up. Lawyers, accountants, and community organizers all stepped forward, determined to ensure that the abuses of the past would never be repeated. Sarah, once a reluctant participant in this fight, now found herself fully immersed in the process, her passion for the cause burning brighter with each passing day. She had seen firsthand the damage that an unchecked HOA could inflict, and she was determined to create a system that would prioritize the needs and concerns of the entire community. This isn't just about restoring order, she told the committee during one of their meetings. It's about building something better, something that truly reflects the values and aspirations of our neighborhood. And so, with a meticulous attention to detail and a steadfast commitment to transparency, the new HOA began to take shape. The bylaws were rewritten from scratch, with stringent financial controls and a system of checks and balances that would prevent any future misuse of funds or abuse of power. The selection process for the new board of directors was also overhauled, with a focus on diversity, community representation, and a demonstrated commitment to the well-being of the neighborhood. Gone were the days of the HOA's iron-fisted rule. In its place, a more inclusive and democratic system began to emerge. As the transition progressed, Sarah found herself navigating a complex web of legal and bureaucratic hurdles, each one seemingly more daunting than the last. But with the support of her community behind her, she refused to be deterred. "We've come too far to give up now," she would often say, her eyes burning with determination. "This is our chance to build something truly special, something that will stand the test of time." And so, with each passing week, the new HOA began to take shape, a testament to the power of community, resilience, and the unwavering pursuit of justice. Sarah, once a reluctant hero, now found herself at the center of a movement that had the potential to inspire change in communities far beyond their own. As the final pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. The road had been long and arduous, but the end was finally in sight. Now, it was time to turn their attention to the future, to building a stronger, more vibrant community that would serve as a beacon of hope for others facing similar challenges. The day of the grand reopening of the newly reformed HOA was a momentous occasion, marked by a sense of hope, excitement, and cautious optimism. The community had come together in a display of unity and determination, united in their desire to create a better future for their neighborhood. As Sarah stood at the podium, addressing the gathered residents, she couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them to this point. The scars of the past were still fresh, but they had been tempered by the collective strength and resilience of the community. Today, we stand here as a testament to the power of community, the importance of transparency, and the unwavering pursuit of justice, she began, her voice steady and resolute. The road we've traveled has been long and arduous, but we've emerged stronger, wiser, and more committed to one another than ever before. The crowd erupted in thunderous applause, the weight of their shared experiences palpable in the air. Sarah paused, allowing the emotion to wash over her before continuing. "The new HOA we've built together is a reflection of our values, our dreams, and our unwavering commitment to the well-being of our neighborhood. It is a place where every voice will be heard, where decisions will be made with the utmost transparency, and where the trust and faith of the community will be our guiding star." As Sarah introduced the new board of directors, each one sharing their vision and commitment to the community, the residents listened with rapt attention. Gone were the days of the HOA's iron-fisted rule. In its place, a new era of inclusivity, accountability, and collaboration had begun. In the weeks and months that followed, the transformed HOA quickly became a model for communities across the country, with Sarah and her team sharing their story and offering guidance to those seeking to rein in the abuses of their own homeowners associations. "This isn't just about us," Sarah would often say. "It's about empowering communities to take back control of their own destinies, to create the kind of neighborhoods we all deserve to live in." And as the new HOA flourished, with residents actively engaged in the decision-making process and a renewed sense of pride and ownership in their community, Sarah couldn't help but feel a deep sense of satisfaction. The battle had been long and hard-fought, but the victory was all the sweeter for it. Now, as she looked out over the thriving neighborhood, Sarah knew that the work was far from over. There would always be new challenges to face, new obstacles to overcome. But with the strength and resilience of her community behind her, she was more than ready to face whatever the future might hold.